We will start by discussing nuclear energy and how it is produced. Nuclear power plants generate carbon-free electricity from heat and steam generated from fuel rods in the nuclear reactor. In this video, we will take a look at pressurized water reactors like the ones found at 3 Mile Island and at Chernobyl. There are several components of a nuclear power plant. Turbine building houses turbines and generator important for generation of electricity. The containment building houses the nuclear reactor and is made of 1 meter thick reinforced concrete. And the cooling tower is where all the hot water is cooled. Inside the reactor pressure vessel, fuel assemblies are found. Fuel assemblies contain many fuel rods which contain fuel pellets comprised of enriched uranium, which make nuclear chain reaction possible. This reaction releases thermal energy which is absorbed by water. This can increase the temperature of the water to more than 500 degrees. The water, however, does not boil due to the high pressure of this vessel maintained by the pressurizer. The heated water is pumped to a heat exchanger which generates steam, since any water that comes in contact with the heat exchanger will absorb the thermal energy. The steam that is produced is then directed to the turbines. First one is generally high pressure and the next two are low pressure turbines. All of the turbines are connected by a shaft to the electricity generator, which produces electricity from the shaft's rotational energy. The steam is then converted to liquid form by a condenser and returned to the steam generator. It is essential that all water systems are kept separate from one another. Water in the primary circulation system is radioactive since it has come in direct contact with the fuel rod. This water never leaves the containment building. Water in the secondary circulation system is used to drive the turbines and is not radioactive. Water in the tertiary circulation system is cool and often from adjacent rivers. This water is used to condense the steam in the secondary circulation system. This is how energy generated from enriched uranium fuel rods via nuclear chain reaction is converted to electricity, which is the lifeblood of modern economies.
There is no safe disposal of nuclear waste. Radioactive life of 250,000 years results in dangerous remains in the environment. Mining and transportation uranium is destructive. Land damages include destroyed mined areas. Accidental spill of contaminated water can result in poison nearby waterways. Nuclear power operations require large quantities of water. The water released back into the environment can harm or kill aquatic life. Thermal discharge.
Nuclear power contamination usually occurs when radioactive substances are exposed to an unwelcoming environment. Contamination is hazardous because of the radioactive decay of the contaminants such as alpha particles, beta particles, gamma rays, and neutrons, which emit ionized radiation. Depending on the type of contamination, there can be very little risk or major impact on people and the environment. Low-impact contamination usually has a very low risk factor, but it can still be detected when using a radiation instrument. Short half-life isotopes can decay on their own, but isotopes with longer half-lives should be cleaned up and disposed of properly because they could still be harmful in very low dosage. High-impact contamination usually follows a major accident exposing harsh radioactive materials to the environment as well as the populations within the region. Health effects of the contamination can lead to external irradiation, which is exposure to radiation outside of the human body. The damage varies based on the duration and strength of the radiation. Internal irradiation happens when one ingests radioactive material by consuming foods or drinks or it being airborne. Forced evacuation due to nuclear power accidents has impacted many people's psychological behavior such as anxiety, depression, and social isolation, and has even led to suicide. Major cases of prevalent radioactive contamination include Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island.
The cost of nuclear energy to the consumer is relatively low, at 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour. However, the real costs lie in building the nuclear power plant, operating costs themselves, and decommissioning the plant once it has run its course. According to Bruce Power, a single 25 kilogram CANDU fuel bundle, about the size of a fire log, can supply 100 homes with electricity for a year. The same electricity from a fossil station would require 400 tons of coal, 270,000 liters of oil, or 300 million liters of natural gas. While nuclear energy is not a renewable source of energy in the same way that hydro or wind energy is renewable, it is considered sustainable since it meets the same sustainability requirements as renewable sources of energy. March 28, 1979, one of the 3 Mile Island reactors in Middletown, Pennsylvania, had a partial meltdown. At the time of the accident, it was the most severe nuclear accident in U.S. history. The accident resulted in no major injuries or casualties immediately following. The average radiation dose received by people living within 10 miles of the 3 Mile Island reactor was 0.08 millisieverts. The maximum off-site dose was 1 millisievert. Many were concerned about the long-term impact of higher than normal exposure to radiation following the accident. Thus, the Pennsylvania Department of Health maintained a registry of over 30,000 people who lived within 5 miles of 3 Mile Island at the time of the accident. In 1997, after 18 years of observation, they concluded that there were no unusual health trends in the area. However, while it appeared as though there were no adverse health consequences, the world's trust in nuclear energy fell following the 3 Mile Island accident.
On April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, located in Ukraine south of the Belarus border, experienced a very big accident while the operators were in the process of testing the reactors. Due to defective engineering and the operators working under faulty and unsafe conditions, there was a massive power surge causing an accident. The accident led to a series of explosions which led to many fires that damaged the reactor and the reactor building. The damaged reactors released colossal amounts of radioactive materials over a 10-day period. Radioactive clouds spread over the better part of Europe and the Northern Hemisphere, but the greatest contamination occurred around Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. After the incident, 134 workers from the nuclear power plant were diagnosed with ARS, also known as acute radiation syndrome, and within the first 4 months of the accident, 28 of the workers died. Radioactive iodine-131 is a common fission product. It was a major component of the radiation released from the Chernobyl disaster, leading to 9 fatal cases of pediatric thyroid cancer and hypothyroidism. Over the past 20 years, there has been an increase in cancer deaths due to the exposure to radiation, but non-exposed people are also dying due to similar reasons. It is still a mystery how many people truly died due to the Chernobyl accident. Some say it was only 28, while others indicate that the accident could have been responsible for up to 600,000 deaths.
Following a major earthquake, a 15-meter tsunami disabled the power supply and cooling of 3 Fukushima Daiichi reactors, causing a nuclear accident on March 11, 2011, Fukushima. All 3 cores largely melted in the first 3 days. The large nuclear accident was rated 7 on the INES scale due to the release of a substantial amount of radioactive material. The Fukushima disaster produced the largest discharge of radioactive material into the ocean in history. 15 months after, 733,000 curies of radioactive cesium were pumped into the ocean. Once a large amount of radioactive cesium enters an ecosystem, it quickly contaminates water, soil, plants, and animals. It's been detected in a large range of Japanese food, including spinach, tea leaves, milk, beef, freshwater fish up to 200 miles from Fukushima. 56% of all fish catches of Japan were found to be contaminated. Fishing continues to be banned off the coast of Fukushima, where 40% of bottom-dwelling fish, sole, halibut, cod, recently found to have radioactive cesium levels higher than current Japanese regulatory limits. Radioactive cesium bioaccumulates, bioconcentrates, and biomagnifies as it moves up the food chain. Routine ingestion of foods contaminated with so-called low levels of radioactive cesium has shown to lead to bioaccumulation in the heart endocrine tissues as well as in the kidneys, small intestines, pancreas, spleen, and liver. This process occurs much faster in children than in adults. In 2013, WHO reports indicate there could have been a 70% higher risk of developing thyroid cancer for girls and exposed infants.
In the second part of this video, we will discuss liquid fluoride thorium reactors or molten salt reactors, and then move on to comparing them to nuclear reactors. Thorium is an element that is close to uranium on the periodic table but has 2 fewer protons. Thorium is as common as dirt but has been historically ignored, while uranium has been the preferred element due to economical and political reasons. In recent years, many proponents of thorium reactors have described it as the future of power production. Liquid fluoride thorium reactors use thorium as fuel. Fission of the fuel heats the salt core of the reactors. The core of the reactor is surrounded by a tank containing a mixture of liquid thorium salts. This tank absorbs the radiation and forms new fuel that is gradually fed into the core. The heated hot or radioactive salt that is generated by fission heats a gas which drives a turbine to generate electricity. Conceptually, LFTRs are more efficient and safer than systems that use pressurized water containers to cool uranium fuel rods in nuclear reactors. Additionally, they produce much less radioactive waste and overall waste compared to nuclear reactors. For instance, fuel rods in a nuclear reactor typically last for 18 months before they have to be refueled. At full capacity, liquid fluoride thorium reactors do not have to be refueled for 30 years. No refueling for extended periods of time also means that it is a sealed system which minimizes proliferation risk of nuclear and/or radioactive materials from their core. Since the tank surrounding the core reactor absorbs the radiation and forms new fuel, the waste produced will be minimal and the environmental impact will also be minimal.
In order to establish a large-scale thorium-powered reactor, it would cost less than $1 billion, with operating costs of $100 million per year. The cost of acquiring the thorium itself is around $80 or less per kilogram. Mining thorium is more efficient than mining uranium, since there is a higher concentration of thorium than uranium in their respective ores. Conventional reactors consume less than 1% of the mined uranium, with the rest becoming waste. On the other hand, thorium-powered reactors may consume about 99% of its thorium fuel, making thorium a much more efficient source of energy. Like traditional means of nuclear energy, thorium is not technically a renewable source of energy, but is still considered a sustainable energy source, since it can provide more than 1,000 years' worth of energy. Furthermore, thorium is more sustainable than traditional means of nuclear energy, since thorium is more abundant in the Earth's crust than uranium.
Uranium accidents have been well documented, as we've seen with the 3 Mile Island accident, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. But what about thorium reactions and their safety? One of the main arguments in favor of thorium reactors is that the nature of the thorium reaction, especially as liquid fuel, make it resistant to meltdowns and therefore safer. Proponents argue that since thorium reactors operate subcritically, they can't sustain their own fission chain reactions, so in theory, the runaway chain reactions that cause nuclear meltdowns would not occur. And if there were a power failure, a reaction supplied with neutrons by a particle accelerator would stop on its own. The main concerns with nuclear energy is contamination and long-term impact, especially environmental impact. As we've seen with nuclear meltdowns in Fukushima, the waters around the Pacific Ocean near Japan are heavily contaminated with cesium and other radioactive materials. But what about thorium? Do the reactors produce such radioactive materials, and are they as bad as uranium-based nuclear radioactive materials or waste? With thorium, much less waste material is produced compared to uranium nuclear reactors. So therefore, it's a lot better to use thorium-based reactors in that sense. Also, the byproducts of the thorium reaction aren't as radioactive as nuclear waste products from uranium. And the products take about 100 years to decay, whereas the waste products from nuclear reactions take up to 1,000 years to decay. We know what uranium-based nuclear energy and thorium-based nuclear energy can offer us, but what are some of the main pros and cons between these sources of energy? With nuclear-based energy, we have to be mindful of the fact that there's a lot of nuclear waste produced. The waste produced by nuclear reactors needs to be disposed of at a safe place, since they are extremely hazardous and can leak radiation if not stored properly. With thorium-based reactors, there's much less waste produced, so the risk for contamination is slightly less. Additionally, with uranium-based nuclear reactors, there is a high risk of nuclear accidents, even though there are new technologies that are put in place to make sure that such disasters won't happen. With a thorium-based reactor, which operates subcritically, the risk for a runaway chain reaction causing a nuclear meltdown is quite less compared to uranium-based nuclear reactors. Another disadvantage for both sources of energy actually is the cost. Both incur a high cost to operate and to maintain. With uranium-based nuclear energy, the waste products that are produced from the reactions can easily be turned into nuclear weapons, which is a concern for nuclear proliferation. With a thorium-based reaction, the waste products are very difficult to make into the dirty bombs that are associated with products from uranium-based nuclear reactions. Since thorium is a better fuel source than uranium, why don't we use thorium as a nuclear fuel in the present day, and why haven't governments pushed for the use of thorium to drive nuclear energy production? So with that in mind, we know that certain countries are already on the path of developing thorium-based reactors, India being one of them, as well as reactors in Canada are also capable of using thorium as a fuel source. But we don't have much experience with thorium. The nuclear energy industry is quite conservative, and the biggest problem with thorium is that we're lacking operational experience with it. When money is at stake, it's difficult to get people to change from the norm.